welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. My name is Yehoshua Gorin. I asked him if I could host today's podcast. He used a few expletives and then said no. Woe is me. But I have been given permission to share the following promotional message. Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that the three magnificent hosts of the Digital Analytics Power Hour will be hosting a live podcast in 2018 at Super Week? That's right. If you hurry up and get your tickets now, you'll be able to meet Michael, Tim, and Mo in person at Super Week, together with a whole bunch of analytics professionals who are really awesome. Super Week will be held from January 29th through February 2nd, 2018 in Galyateto, Hungary. Since tickets are limited, you should hurry up and reserve your spot for this premier industry conference. Just go to http://www.superweek.hu. You'll also get a chance to meet me, because I'll be the MC at the event. It's gonna be a blast. And now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Yay!
Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Tim, Michael, Mo, and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them on Facebook at facebook.com/Analytics Hour and their website analyticshour.io. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 73. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be solo? All alone, all by yourself, with no one else. Completely alone. To the introverts, it's like, where do I sign up? But maybe even extroverts have good reason to go solo. Well, hang your own shingle and start your own LLC or sole proprietorship. That's what we're talking about on this episode. As always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mo Kiss. She's the product analyst at The Iconic. How you going, Mo?
I'm going great. You nailed it that
so proud of
time.
myself. And, of course, Tim Wilson, senior partner at Analytics Demystified. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, Michael and Mo. I sort of feel like maybe we should just drop off and you should do this all by yourself. In the spirit of the episode.
Yeah. Mo, you're on your own. Good luck.
Oh, great. Don't worry, I've got this.
And I'm Michael Helbling. I'm the analytics practice lead at Search Discovery. But we needed an example of this digital nomad life. So who better than our guest, Adam Ribaudo? Adam started out in agency life as a developer, and then the agency grew to a huge size, and he became the VP of services. But then he decided to go out on his own in analytics and marketing technology. He started freelancing a few years ago. He loves the process, the challenge, the education that you need continuously to be successful as an entrepreneur. And we're glad to welcome him to share his story with us. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hey, thanks for having me. I do feel like I should set the record. Completely alone makes me sound like some sort of cave troll. I do see the sunlight every once in a while, so I just want to set that straight.
Well, I was a little worried the candle was going to burn out in your little cave there, but it sounds like maybe you can open a window. Yeah.
Right. I have enough oil for the winter.
Well, it's I mean, that's a discipline in of itself. If you don't have to be in front of people every day, it's sort of like, well, do I really need to shower today? I mean, that's a question. Yeah.
Is that our first question?
I don't think so.
Whether I showered today. Man, no softballs
right.
here.
Let's get right to the tough stuff. All right. Well, Mo, you had a really interesting question earlier as we're getting ready. Maybe we kick off with that one.
So, Adam, I've noticed in the analytics community of late, it seems to be a little bit of the rage to go out solo and on your own. But I suppose for me, there's lots of examples of this, and peers of mine are doing this kind of in pairs or groups of 3. Is there anything unique to the experience when you are literally a one-person show versus having, say, 2 or 3 people as part of your team?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, which is from that of a sole freelancer, sole proprietor. But I will say that something that has kept me sane throughout this process is that I do work with I subcontract a colleague who is a little more junior than I am and started out on the same path, maybe like a year or two behind me. And that's been super helpful. Just from a day-to-day, you have someone to, bitch to if, a client is really, tweaking you the wrong way, or you just need to vent a little bit. It is good to have somebody who's sort of on that level. So from sort of like just a sanity perspective, I can definitely speak to, having somewhat of a cohort, while you're on this journey and having someone to lean on a bit. But I'm sure it's going to be a totally different experience if you're 2 or 3 professionals in your own co-working space trying to build a business together. But that's not really what I'm doing.
Well, I feel like, the smallest I've ever gone was 4, was kind of a starting up. And I was the 4th one. There were kind of 2 guys with the vision. And it seems like there is a point where with one, you may say, I want to be me and I want to have the independence and the flexibility. And I kind of just want to I want the stuff that appeals to the control and flexibility. And 2, it may also be that, especially if you're great friends or if you're, married or partners or whatever. 3 seems like it maybe still is in that. Like once you get to like in the 3 to 4, to me, it feels like you're trying to like start a company and grow something. And you're starting off with the dynamics of we all have to be really well aligned, because now we're a startup. We're not like a sole proprietor who, I get every argument I have is with myself. That's my
And that's a really good point to make, I think, because the path you're going to go down is going to be completely different if you're starting out with that startup mentality or growing a business mentality versus what I'm doing is I'm trying to survive comfortably. I'm not trying to, grow a huge agency, anything like that. I'm doing this because I enjoy the work. I have other passions or pursuits that I also like to follow. This is a comfortable lifestyle for me. It's engaging. It's interesting. And I can support myself doing this. And so, neither direction is right or wrong. It really just depends on your preference and what you're trying to do. But I think that's a decision that one should make really early on if you feel like, going out on your own or freelancing or maybe leaving your company is, try to think about where you want to take this, sort of that 5-year plan, I guess, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because certainly for our listeners, it's sort of, that's the question is, if you want to be your own individual shop, how do you keep it small? Like, it's a lot of work comes your way, and you've got to make decisions about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I struggle with that because I tend to not say no. I mean, I think I've just been brought up in that agency mentality that as soon as you say no, you die. So I do have a tendency of taking on a little bit more than maybe I should. But there are outlets. There is a community out there of other freelancers, and if you can find some in your area that you trust or through colleagues, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about networking and sort of ways of finding that community. But that you do have some release valves there, and like I mentioned, I'm working with a subcontractor. I work with other freelancers on different gigs, and that can help a lot.
So this made me think, as you described it, sort of as you wanted to make a comfortable living and other benefits. I'm sure we'll get into that. Maybe there's this other dimension of you feel like you're very capable, above average, able to do the work of analytics and do it well and support yourself, which I think is absolutely, that's kind of one angle. I think there are other people, and I'm trying to think of some specific people I've run into, and maybe this skews more towards product type things, that I've got an idea of how I can do something new and innovative or different, and the only way I'm going to get the flexibility to prove out that this new and different and totally innovative thing is going to happen is if I go on my own. I'm doing it because I don't like the way that I do the work. The way that you do the work could be done as part of an agency or part of a larger consultancy or part of a company. Do you guys think that's a fair distinction as well?
Yeah. So you mean sort of launching a new product or service versus consulting to solve existing challenges with existing solutions? Is that sort of the distinction you're making?
I think so. Like do what's being done well. Like be a highly valued, capable, doing which doesn't mean there's not creativity and innovation and ways to make things that are unique and differentiate you, as opposed to what's frustrating me is people aren't doing this thing, or this product hasn't been built, or this approach hasn't been taken, and this is going to change the world. Which seems like that also skews back towards the growth. I want to build an organization that really gets scale and takes over the world, as opposed to I want to build a personal reputation and have a steady flow of business and the right level of flexibility. I don't know. Maybe I'm forcing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it has to be either or necessarily. When I started out, and this seems silly or sounds silly in retrospect, but I was so certain that I was just going to land so many Google Tag Manager implementation gigs, because I saw, there's so many people out there to this day haven't implemented a tag management system, and I was just sure that was my ticket to freelancing, is just selling myself as a tag manager implementation engineer almost, and just sort of like knocking those out. And so it's kind of taking something a newer product that's been developed and applying it to people who didn't even know they needed that product. And looking back on that, I think, came to realize that clients aren't really interested in a tag management system. They're interested in all the things that a tag management system lets you do, and you have to focus on those things and sell those services, and then you'll end up backing yourself into some GTM implementations here and there. But I think if it helps you make that leap because you notice something in the industry that you think other people haven't noticed, maybe there's an email service provider system that you know is a game changer and nobody's using it yet. You could sell your email marketing expertise and use that as your kind of your secret weapon. That might be a way to kind of straddle both of those worlds.
So I've got a bit of a question around that initial thought about how you saw yourself positioning in the market of being a GTM expert. I guess when I think about going solo, to me, it sounds really scary. And you and Tim kind of keep mentioning flexibility and space for other things in your lives. When I think about going solo, I think it sounds like a hell of a lot of work. I think it sounds really hard. And so I just want to hear, even just that you go out thinking I'm really good at this one thing and I'm going to make money doing it. And that's already been completely flipped. So I guess I want to hear a little bit more about how do you know how to make that decision? And is it as hard as I think it is?
Yeah, the journey to making the decision, I'm sure, is different for everybody. So I can talk a little bit about mine, which is that, as Michael mentioned, I was working at an agency for about 7 years, and it was growing and growing, and I was taking on more and more management responsibilities and doing less and less in terms of client services. And so I what kind of kicked my butt into really making this decision was just that desire to be doing again. And I saw this, I could laterally move to another agency, but I doubted that I would end up really doing the work that I really wanted to do. So I figured this was kind of the my last resort, really, to be actually super hands-on and doing this kind of work.
How long do you feel like, you obviously don't know, it was gradual, but was it like that was building over 3 years, or that was building over 3 months, or at some point you became conscious of, I'm pondering making this big scary jump? How long did you then ponder it?
Right. Yeah, I would say maybe over the course of a year. I think everybody gets that itch every once in a while, right? To break out, to do something different, to find a new company, find greener pastures. And in a lot of cases, hopefully you work through that itch and you work with your manager and you find out what's really the problem and you shift your responsibilities and you see what can happen. So I'd say I got that itch maybe a year before I left and worked with my manager, and we made some changes. And I think after a few changes, that itch was still there. And I'd say maybe at the 6-month mark, started making more formal plans and notions about, okay, wait, this is doable. This is something I can do. This is, I have the safety net to make this possible, and, sort of align things to make it more and more doable every day.
So what did you think through on that? You said safety net. Was that literally like, I've got cash in the bank that I've got a 6 month, I've got a 6 month runway, or had you gone as far as saying, this is my go, no go, X months in as to when I have to say, whoops, time to go back to stability?
Yeah. I had that napkin math done, and I definitely had a spreadsheet of, expected revenue and does this even make sense mathematically? Can I support myself? That kind of stuff. So there were some checks and balances there for sure. Yeah, so I think, I would definitely give the advice that when you are making that, if you're going to make this decision, set the expectation that you're going to fail, and that way you'll be pleasantly surprised when you don't. Is that okay?
If you don't.
Because honestly, I mean, especially in my situation, I don't have any dependents or anything. I'm sure it's a very different scenario if you do, and if people are depending on you, you have to know what your exit is and what your plan B is if things do fail and don't, that revenue doesn't come in as you're expecting. So, I found it safer to set the bar super low, and then, again, I've been pleasantly surprised every day that I'm still able to do this.
Yeah, I think I share Mo's sentiment, because I definitely considered this at one point and was like, man, that seems like you'd have to go out and sell the work, then you have to do the work, and it's like, that's 2 jobs in one. And it's like, how will you ever, and it's like, so that's something I think is really a good myth maybe to dispel for people. Or help people understand how to balance that out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, right. So for most, the second part of our question, is it as bad as it sounds? I would say yes and no. I mean, it is that much work. Like, there's no escaping that work, right? You do need to do the work, and you need to keep selling your work even while you're doing the work. That's just a fact. But I would say that it can't be overlooked how the flexibility and how you align your working hours and around and within the rest of your life makes that a little bit more doable than it might sound at the outset. Because there's evenings and weekends, guys. No, but I mean, you shift up some of the things that you were doing in the evenings and weekends, during the day, and you can shift some of the stuff you do during the day into the evenings and weekends, and it's just you can better balance your life to fit your work and your work to fit your life. And so, I feel like I've been able to find that balance, and maybe there's some scenarios where it does become untenable for people, and maybe due to other life circumstances, but I haven't found it, like, I'm not pulling out my hair every day trying to figure out when am I going to make time to, send out this proposal, anything like that.
Do you find yourself, like, on a typical Saturday, Sunday, are you doing 0 work, a couple hours of work, 8 hours of work? Not that there aren't plenty of people in corporate jobs who could say, I haven't not worked on a Saturday or Sunday, but I guess, and maybe that's a personal style. There could be people who say, I'm drawing these hard boundaries and I'm going to take these off.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah, I think it totally comes down to personal style, because I work on Sundays usually for like 4 hours because I like getting a jump on the week. But I was doing that, at the agency as well. So I think it's that's more personal preference. I think I think you can fit within a 40 to 50 hour week and do this type of work.
Was that even for the first like months number 1 and 2? Like now, and I should know this. How long? Or you're like 2 years in? How far?
Yeah, a little over 2 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was May 2015.
So, which was part of the reason we wanted to talk. Like, there are people who have gone out on their own and sort of, built their own thing, but that was, 10 years ago. So for those first like couple of months, you didn't have a full client load, so you were still 40 to 50 hours a week, even if you were doing all this other stuff? Or was there a period where you were like, no, I'm going to just be nose to the grindstone, and I have to kill myself on this for 3 months to get, I'm assuming there's all sorts of insurance, accounts payable, bookkeeping. Like, the first time you go through something with a client, how much that couldn't have all been figured out before you had to go through it, right?
Well, the challenge starting out wasn't how am I going to fit in all this work? It's how am I going to fit in all this free time all of a sudden that I don't have a job.
So, that sounds delightful.
Yeah. That's the hardest part, honestly, is waking up on a Monday morning and be like, well, calendar's free. Got to pretend to work with everybody else. Still don't have a client.
So when you made the decision, you didn't have a client yet?
No, I did. I'm being a little facetious there, because my work was gracious enough, and timing just coincidentally lined up so that I was on an important enough project that it made sense for them to keep me on as a consultant through the transition into freelancing. So I'd say for 3 or 4 months I stayed on at maybe like 40 to 50% time, working on that project. So that was ideal. I mean, obviously not everybody's going to be in a similar situation, but if you can find a way to make that work without being opportunistic and lining up work even though you're going to leave, if you can find a way to make that type of an arrangement, it helps it helps avoid what I was just describing, which is, waking up and feeling like you have no purpose in life, because you still have a project you're working on. And then there's the administrative stuff, but that doesn't take a whole lot of hours out of the day. I mean, I had to set up an LLC and that kind of stuff, but it's all super
But it seems like I can think of a few people I know who said, I want to go out on my own for something. If I could find something that's a hard 20-hour a week commitment, so that gives me, that doubles my runway, and it gives me that I'm never going to wake up with nothing to do, because I've got, and the challenge is to not have that grow to be a sole client or subcontracting, so it seems like there is that.
Right.
I know a few people who, and sort of you wound up with that as well, that you had about half of your time which meant both some income and some free time, and probably more structure around I'm assuming you switched from kind of salaried to no, you've got me for 20 hours a week,
Yeah, so another branching path and another decision that has to be made is whether you want to be the type of contractor that is fully assigned to a client for, say, 6-month stretch, because there are gigs like that, right? Or have a multitude of clients that you're working with on and off, and sort of like Michael was saying, you're selling and you're working, you're selling and you're working. And I took the latter path because that I find that more interesting myself. But in that case, you need to set strict limits with your clients about how available you are to them. And so when I mentioned I was consulting with my agency, I was the one that set that 50% limit, because I knew I needed to have the mental bandwidth to go out and find work and network and actually build this thing off the ground. So that's definitely some advice I would give, is set upper limits for how much you're going to work for a client, because even though you're eager to get a client and get the work, you need to save some space, to build something.
I was actually talking about this at Web Analytics Wednesday a few weeks ago, because as I said, it seems a lot of people in the industry are really wanting to make this move. And a friend of mine who's actually an avid listener of the show, I've discovered, one of the questions that he had, he's relatively early in this process, and he's like, I don't get how people find clients. Like, that's the bit. And the funny thing is, like, his background is in sales, but the bit that he's really struggling with is the how do you get clients? Because another friend of ours has done the same thing, but he has seemed to have gotten all of his clients through, I guess, the analytics community, because he was an analyst and he already had those relationships. So I'm keen to hear a little bit from you about, particularly when you first started, like, how did you tackle that?
Yeah, it was a lot of lunches, a lot of talking to people, older colleagues that I used to work with, calling them up and grabbing lunch with them. And that's been a pretty consistent part of my practice ever since. And sort of a mental health thing, make sure that you're reaching out, you're, hanging out with people, you're meeting with people, and making sure that it's not about making a sale, just having a lot of friendly lunches or coffee dates with people, and just sort of talking about what's going on in your life. And inevitably, 20% of those, someone's going to say, oh, hey, I heard somebody's actually looking for those services, and you sort of follow up on that. So it's, this might not be especially novel advice, but, I read Keith Frazee's Never Eat Alone, and it sort of made networking not a dirty word for me. I think that was kind of an important milestone, just actually like feeling like I can network and feeling like I can meet people and be comfortable in that environment. And that's been really, really crucial, because you can never point to one meeting or one, moment that led to these clients. But when you look back on it, it was the sum of all of these different sort of, meetups and lunches and coffee dates and things like that helped build up some momentum to the point where people are talking about you, people know that you exist. And I think in the analytics specifically, like that's kind of advice you can give to any freelancer, right? But I think in the analytics community specifically, because it is a little bit smaller, a little bit more close knit, and freelancing isn't that I don't want to say popular, but I don't meet a ton of freelancers doing what I'm doing. I think there's room for more. So it becomes a little bit easier just because of the community, Digital Analytics Association, the Measure Slack, this podcast. It's all sort of it helps with that networking aspect.
Just a housekeeping item, real quick. If you do get work coming from the podcast, we do expect.
I have to
mention
say,
that on the air, just part of our normal contract. No big deal.
You could make a case that all of my work came from the podcast, because when I first started freelancing, one of the things that made me feel as though there was going to be a community surrounding me in this type of challenge was finding Digital Analytics Power Hour. And just through, not that you guys ever said it explicitly, but just through context clues, you kind of hear how you guys talk about the community, the networking, the conferences, the drinks after conferences. You get these little clues that tell you, this is a community I can get down with. This is something that...
And yet we have never received a check for that. Interesting. Very interesting.
I really thought that was going to go down the path of I found the podcast and realized, actually have a podcast, the bar must be really low.
I'm going to be a star.
But on that, it's interesting, and because I do work from home as well, so I've got that sort of shared. I mean, there's that sanity bit that there are times when you can feel like, oh, if I go out for lunch, like if I eat lunch and walk the dog here, I'm still like 35 minutes and I've gotten everything done. But if you're working from home and say, look, I can go have lunch with somebody who either I know and enjoyed working with or enjoyed meeting and was interesting, and I can tell myself that I'm not selling, so I don't have to feel sleazy about it, but it is what I should be doing, is staying out there and having these conversations. Or even, how often are you having lunch or coffee or something with somebody who, a contact of yours said, oh, you two guys should get together, and you haven't actually met? I feel like that happens to me quite a bit, and 90% of the time it's actually really enjoyable, even if, it's a much lower that turns into business. I've just kind of learned to say, sure, let's do it.
That's absolutely the right attitude. I found myself just having a period where I just have to say yes to everything, because you never know where the next sale is going to come from, where the next opportunity is going to come from. So just say yes, and you have to be comfortable meeting with strangers and saying nice things about yourself. And as stupid as it seems, that can be really hard for some people, including myself still. Sometimes, it's not for everybody, but I think that it has to be. It's a necessary part of the process. So I would say, probably at least once a week, maybe twice a week, I'll have lunch with somebody, just because I have to, get out of the house and make sure that I'm people know that I'm still alive. But in terms of business lunches or things like that, maybe a couple a month or something like that.
Did you start doing that a little bit when you're like, I know I'm going to go do this, so let me start?
I guess a little bit, not in earnest, because I think my work probably would have noticed if I was, going out every single time at lunchtime and to weird parts.
Well, and I think it brings up a sort of a thing. There's actually a number of skills at play here in terms of sort of being successful and kind of understanding some of these concepts. How much of your professional services experience do you think was formative or important for your success in going out on your own?
Well, this is something we haven't really talked about, but given the fact that I didn't really have much analytics experience before I started freelancing, I would say a whole heck of a lot. Mm-hmm. So my experience at the agency was, started as a developer, grew their design and user experience group, then grew their account team, and sort of ended up for the last couple of years managing the account managers, but also serving as an account manager on key clients. So it was a lot of customer service, customer strategy, selling to customers, pitching, things like that. So that was sort of my bread and butter. Along the way, I became interested in analytics by way of, I'd say, two things. One, we did a lot of Sitecore work at our agency, and Sitecore's been pushing their analytics database and engine, personalization and A/B testing engine for the last 7 years or so. And so I learned to sell that stuff before I really even knew what it was or really had a hands-on experience, because I was basically told Sitecore has these new capabilities, we need to sell them to our clients. So I had to figure out really fast what A/B testing was and what personalization was, not having really implemented it myself. And the second would be just sort of the rise of marketing technology and marketing technologist as a word in our lexicon now. And Scott Brinker is Boston-based, so has a lot of clout here, and seen him speak a couple times. So I'd say through those two things, I started just keying in on analytics and marketing technology as like a huge need in a marketplace and a space that was wide open for freelance consultant.
How did you craft that path to learning? Because I think about it, and I'm pretty new to analytics as well, and a lot of my learning comes from my peers, and without them, without having that that person to bounce off, or that person to show you how to do something, someone's mistake that you can learn from. Like, how are you going about keeping your learning up to date, and even in those early stages?
You just get really, really clueless clients, right? And that way, you just have to stay a little.
I mean, you joke, but my first few clients were pretty small, and they're probably clients that I wouldn't take on now, but they were instrumental to just the fact that they gave me the keys to the kingdom in terms of HubSpot and Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, and they didn't care as long as the work got done. So I was able to poke around and I got the job done. It probably took me a little bit longer than it would have taken a seasoned professional, but that it is a legitimate way to learn on the job. Find clients who are open to your skill set and what you're bringing to the table, and it might take you a little bit longer. You're learning on the job, but it's totally legitimate. And then there are more classical ways. So I took a Lunametrics course while I was still at the agency. I got a GA-IQ certified, which was really helpful for me to just making GA knowable. It was kind of this black box before, and then once I realized, you're just requesting a blank image and sending these parameters over. And once you got it down to sort of HTTP terms that I could understand, it broke it wide open, and I realized how simple, kind of tagging and tracking is. So that was kind of a huge milestone for me. So there's definitely, more formal educational options. Well.
The fact that you haven't mentioned the formative experience with Analysis Exchange just kind of
right, and of course
your mentor, your alleged mentor.
It goes without saying, Tim. Right. I think it's.
Yep. Analysis Exchange with Tim Wilson, my mentor, who taught me everything I know.
No checks have been sent to Tim Wilson. It's like just. Where's
the... Fire my postman.
I realize probably the question that I see the most, and I'm the most uncomfortable and ill-equipped to answer, and feel free to completely dance around this and speak in generalities, but people say, I'm going out on my own, how much do I charge, or how much do I figure out how much to charge? Mm-hmm. And I've got some standard advice and points I make without being ever able to say, well, this is what you should charge. How did you figure that out? I guess what process did you go through? Not necessarily what is your bill rate.
Sure. Yeah, I know exactly what the process was. It was I knew exactly how much I was being billed out to when I was at the agency, and I also knew that I was I was a principal consultant at that agency. I was doing a lot of that work, and so I already felt valued at that rate. So they sort of trained me to sort of feel valued at a higher rate, and I cut that rate by 30%. I was like, well, surely if people are paying for me, at this agency rate, they're going to be thrilled to hire that same person at a 30% discount. So that was my mentality. It mostly worked out. I think for some of the earlier clients, you do get a little bit more accommodating with your rate to make sure that you're bringing in some work. So for some of those smaller early clients,
and that they will be thrilled that and that you're bringing in work and you want them to be thrilled with the value because you want them to be referring.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
You want to feel like you're over delivering, and then you sort of build back up to the rate that you want. So. I don't know. That seemed to work for me. I think it seems legitimate if you know what you're being billed at, today. Use that as a starting point.
Well, and I'll say the flip side, that just because you said you build back up, that I assume is not building back up with any once you set a rate with the client, it is very, very hard to go up. So you're building up with the next client because you're I can go up. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And you through their facial expressions, when you tell them your rate, you quickly get a read on the market for what is an acceptable rate and what is not. So after your first 3 clients, you'll get it, I'm sure.
But you have to be careful, because there are times where people just have completely unrealistic expectations, right? And they're expecting, they're saying, I'm expecting to pay somebody, $20 an hour, because I only need them that. So did you have any early on when you got to the point of actually a hard quote, were you willing to, and whether it happened or not, were you willing if they said that's too much? Did you have a mental line in the sand where you're like, yeah, but this isn't going to work long term if I'm below that? Or did that never happen?
Yeah, I guess that's happened maybe once or twice. I don't know. What I've stayed true on to myself is that I'm always going to be billed at an hourly rate. I haven't done any scope sort of project based proposals And that's very intentional. I know how ugly things can get in terms of, that was in scope, that was out of scope. And I just don't think the incentives are aligned in those types of proposals. So, I stick to an hourly rate, and that way I know, I'm using my time and effectively. And if I'm not using that time for another client, I'm still, going to have a paycheck at the end of the day. But I've given, a little here and there on rate, I guess, just depending on the scenario.
It's interesting. There seems to be it is a sort of hotly debated. I mean, there are people in the industry who, and even beyond our industry, who are like, yeah, time and materials is terrible because it's got all these horrible incentives. And I'm kind of with you. It sort of depends on the nature of the work. If you're doing a Google Tag Manager implementation, you have a good handle on their site and the scope, then there is a start and an end. And that's like, it's a 3-month project or a 2-month project or a 1-month project of X amount of size. Whereas if you're supporting them with analysis and reporting and trying to be kind of staff augmentation, it's very, very hard to say this is the scope because you don't necessarily have one deliverable. So to me, it feels like you could be independent and say, but if you were the GTM implementation guy, you could be like, look, here's my GTM implementation. I've done this 10 times, and this is exactly how I've learned how to write it so that the scope is very clear and it is fixed. And I'm going to get burned occasionally, but I'm also going to be super smooth occasionally.
I'm not interested in that. It just has no appeal to me. I like the variety, and I like working on totally different projects from one to the next. And so I think that necessitates an hourly rate. That's just my belief. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you.
So I'd like to shift gears a little bit, if that's okay, Adam. And I'd like to get a little bit of an understanding. Whenever you talk to people that go out on their own, they're starting their own business, one of the pieces of advice that comes up quite often is that you're going to have to devote more energy than you think to the tasks that you either don't like or you're not good at, and that the stuff that you like will come easily and you'll make enough time for it. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, I don't know. So have I made the buckets of what I like and what I don't like? I think it definitely takes a certain amount of self-awareness and self-reflection around, usually in hindsight, around what I actually procrastinated about, this week, as opposed to really just, nailed because I was confident about it and felt good about doing it. So I think there is a lot of looking back and realizing like, I really left this to the last minute because I just don't like reporting or whatever it is. So I guess I would just frame that as you have to keep yourself honest because you don't have a boss, who's probably usually there to play that role to say, hey, I noticed you tackled this one task I gave you, but not this other one, even though the other one was given you before the one that you tackled. Usually there's somebody else in the room to sort of tell you how you're behaving and how you're, taking different tasks and completing them. So it does take maybe a little bit of stepping outside of yourself and being honest about what you're procrastinating on, definitely.
And how have you found the admin side of the business in particular? Has that, invoicing clients and is that something that comes naturally to you, or have you kind of had to learn the ropes around that?
Yeah, I love it. It's one of the few moments where you can just totally tune out, right? And just do it. Like invoicing, oh my God. You can listen to music and just turn off your brain and do it. That's a pleasure, I think. Honestly.
But have you had to chase, what about the chasing payment? Have you had to deal with either disputes or tracking down late payment type stuff?
Nothing
where you've
major.
had to all of a sudden shift into
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky because I've heard some real horror stories, and I certainly have colleagues who have gone through worse. I haven't had anything too bad. I've had late payments, but nothing that an email reminder hasn't cleared up. And I think a lot of it has to do with not dealing with scope-based projects or scope and what's the word I'm looking for, where you set the payment terms based on the scope completed, and then it becomes an argument. Yeah, then it becomes an argument. Well, are you really 33% through this?
Got it.
Yeah.
And have you had to rely on outsourcing for anything thus far, or are you pretty much a one-person show?
Yeah,
for the admin or for the administrative stuff or for the actual
either,
work?
to be honest. Have you gotten to a stage where the work's gotten so much you've had to bring in someone else?
Yeah, so not for the admin. Like I mentioned, I think the admin I don't know. I feel like I hear people fret about this quite a bit, but the only admin stuff I can really think of is the accounting and invoicing and sending out proposals and I guess paying vendors, that kind of thing. It hasn't been too bad, so I wouldn't worry about bringing somebody else in for that. But certainly for client work, there is a moment where you have to accept I cannot give this client the attention it deserves, this project the attention it deserves, unless I bring in somebody else. And so I have done that. I've been working with somebody for the last year and a half who's been instrumental in a lot of projects, and I'm bringing somebody on in October as well to help handle some work. So I'll be working with 2 subcontractors at that point.
And so I'm curious because from the Australian perspective, a lot of the time when we bring in freelancers, it's from people overseas, particularly around Asia, like Eastern Europe. I mean, and then there's a whole second set of issues about dealing with people in different languages and different time zones. And the people that you're working with, are they based in the US or have you looked a bit further afield?
Yeah, they're people who are in a similar situation that I am, and they just they happen to be in Boston as well. So yeah, these are more like I think I mentioned him earlier, but one of the subcontractors is just a little bit more junior than I am, doing the same thing. So he's happy to have somebody sort of feeding him work and learning from me, and I'm learning from him. So it's finding that kind of a network. I haven't had to bring in offshore developers, anything like that. It's been the work that I do, which I guess we haven't really talked about, is PPC and web analytics and reporting and tagging implementation, and these are skill sets that I would feel more comfortable working with somebody I have a personal relationship with than say like a TaskRabbit type one-off outsourcing kind of deal. Yeah.
Have you run into any cases where when you're at a company, they've got some level of IT and the help desk and protocols and they deal with when they're selling to another company, if there are requirements for compliance for data security or data privacy or that sort of thing, have you run into cases where either, you've pretty much won the business, but now you need to jump through the hoop of IT or security or compliance and they're asking you for like typically corporate things that you're like, I'm just working from my home office, or is that not? Yeah. I mean, that's
what's your password recovery policy?
What's my insurance policy up to?
Yeah, what's your data purging? Does it fit some corporate standard or some standard you've never heard of?
Do you have a paper shredder on your premises?
Yeah, no, but I think that's sort of by the design of the system, which is to say that the types of enterprises that would have those policies have their own internal analytics or paid marketing shop, right? So this is probably worth mentioning here, which is that I have 2 categories of clients. I have the clients that I've earned on my own, which tend to be a bit smaller, small to mid-size, and then I have the clients that I'm working with through another agency. So I'm subcontracted through agencies, and for the agencies, I'm working with the big guns, right? Bigger brands. But the clients that I have on my own are like I said, small to mid-size. So it hasn't been an issue because by design, bigger companies are going to want to work with an agency, not with a freelancer. And so luckily I can straddle both worlds, and I get to work with really big brands because I'm working through the agency, and so I feel like I'm doing good work for impactful brands, and it works for me.
So tell me more about this work that you do for other consultancy. No, I'm just kidding.
Let me cut you a deal.
Am I right in thinking that even the work you're doing through agencies are still through sort of the network that you built? Like, it wasn't like the agency that was also you maintained relationships or built relationships, and they were saying, hey, we have this need. Let's bring somebody there in account management somewhere knows, Adam could probably do this. And as an agency, they're set up to handle freelancers.
I can draw a direct line between the eMetrics Summit in Boston that I emceed that you spoke at, Tim, and one of the agencies that I work with right now. So, I mean, the DA has definitely been helpful. I guess, do I owe them a check now? No, maybe they should.
Just a shout out. Just a shout out on the podcast is sufficient.
Yeah, so they've been great, and I think I mentioned it before. Just knowing that you have an analytics community to lean on, I would attribute it more to that than necessarily older colleagues that I've worked with at past jobs or anything.
It probably does Bear, you've sort of mentioned it in a couple of ways, but you also co-ran the DAA symposium in Boston. Right. You, as you just mentioned, like you said, I'm going to go to eMetrics in Boston. So there's this component that occasionally I feel like I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about going out on their own, and it's not clear that they actually know how to engage with the community or the industry. So that probably, like, it keeps coming up as we're talking, but we haven't really explicitly said it. Which hopefully means you're going out to do something that you're passionate about.
Right.
And so you're happy to go and talk about it and learn more about it. And that just feeds itself. But if there's someone thinking, I just want the flexibility and I think that it'll
right.
be more lucrative and I don't want to have to work for somebody, and analytics seems like the way to go, but they're not really recognizing that, they need to be internally motivated and interested enough to go out and just talk to people.
Ask yourself, when was the last time you went to a meetup, professional meetup? If the answer is, over a year, do you really want to freelance? Because you're going to be going to a lot of meetups.
Does the podcast count as a meetup? Because I just asked for a friend. No.
It's a very small meetup.
Well, and so as details come out, Adam, it is obvious that you worked really hard. You've created a lot. I mean, you co-hosted or helped organize the symposium for the DAA. Like you're doing a lot of networking. You emceed the eMetrics in Boston. So you're kind of like a Tim Wilson type person in that you're just always doing stuff. So if you're a lazy person like me, would it be okay to do this, or would you be warning people hey, you need to have a lot of self-initiation to be successful here?
I think you would be really great at another job. I
hear that a lot.
I'm sure there's something for you. We're going to find a great spot for you. No, I mean, I think you're hitting on something real, which is that you have to, get excited about taking initiative. I mentioned, having lunch with strangers. If that makes you deeply uncomfortable, then it, might not be a great fit. Which doesn't make you a bad person, by the way. I mean, there's different ways of approaching this, and there's different
other things make you a bad person.
Yes.
And I own all those things, Tim. I love it. There used to be a team Evil Forces in analytics, of which I was a member. All right. Tim is giving me the wrap-up sign, but I really don't want to. But maybe as we head toward wrap-up, I just want to ask you one more question, Adam, and then we'll get into a wrap-up routine, which is resources. What would you tell somebody hey, here are the 3 things you need to know, or the 2 books you need to read, or however you want to frame that up for people. But if somebody's wow, I listened to this episode, I'm really excited about sending checks to both the Analytics Power Hour and Adam Ribaudo because I'm going to have a successful career as a freelancer. What would you say? Foundational, you got to do these things or read these or whatever.
Listen to Digital Analytics Power Hour. That's number 1.
Really?
I'm playing to my audience.
Sage advice.
I probably mentioned them all just scattered about, so maybe I can collect them here. But I mentioned Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. I thought that was great, and it's kind of a timeless book, so it might not be adding anything new here, but it was helpful for me to get over that networking, getting excited about networking hurdle. And Digital Analytics Association, the Measure Slack. I've done a couple of structured educational units at this point. I mentioned Lunametrics training. I did a data science program at Northeastern called Level. And I took a course with Tim on the Dartistics course. So, I think finding those types of opportunities has been helpful just to make sure that you feel, you're keeping your ear to the ground, you're listening for the, what's the next thing, and sort of staying up on industry changes in terms and tools and technology and things like that. Yeah, so I think those would be my hits, my best ofs.
A lot of those really boil down to, have passion and engage and try to grow, right? I mean, I think I'm going to be reading Never Eat Alone. So
yeah.
Actually, I was not familiar with it, but now it seems like a good one.
Well, this is a great topic. And actually, I feel like there's actually a lot of lessons there for anybody whether you go out on your own or not, I think based on this discussion, I think they're applicable. So I think that's kind of neat. One thing we do on the show is we go around and we do a last call, which is just something we've got to share that we found interesting in the last couple of weeks. I'm putting you at a disadvantage, Adam, because you just shared a bunch of resources and things that are interesting. But I'm going to ask you for one more thing. Do you have a last call that you wanted to share?
Digging through the bottom of the well. Yes, I do. Found it. So riding off of, I think, your last episode, at least the last one I listened to, was on machine learning. So there's a gallery in Boston called the Open Gallery, run by a friend of mine, and their focus is on internet and society. And they hosted an exhibit showcasing graffiti artist Chantal Martin. She's a British artist who trained a neural network through the help of a neuro... I had the name here. Anyway, we can post it. Sarah Schwetman collaborated with Chantal Martin to train a computer to create her drawings. So they fed in a series of steps. She would sort of step through the drawing, like here's the beginning of the drawing, here's the middle of the drawing, here's the ending of the drawing, and the computer eventually learned how to complete her drawings for her. And it opens up a lot of questions about, the value of an artist and is the art still meaningful if it's made by a computer and not Chantal. So it was a really fascinating exhibit, and they had all the pieces up that they used for training the neural network, and then they also had a CAD robotic arm making the drawings in real time, so you could watch the drawings be created.
Wow,
that was excellent. Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
Hopefully we can post a link there. I've got an article I can share.
The benefits of living in
That's
Boston.
really cool.
I know. There's a couple of good colleges in Boston, I've heard.
One or two.
Yeah. Mo, do you have a last call?
I have two today, and they're a little bit odd. So the first one is actually a tool, and there's a bit of me that feels a little bit guilty for plugging a tool, but I saw a demo a couple of weeks ago, and when you're just like... I have this thing where sometimes I shy away from doing something just because everyone else is doing it. And everyone's been talking about Domo, and I've been like, no, I refuse to have a play around. Like, this is, no, I'm not into it. But I did. And the reason that I wanted to raise it is the thing that I think is really cool, particularly if you're working at a company that's a bit smaller, that you don't have a data warehouse. I probably didn't realize that functionality of how you could pull in the different data sets and connect them. So if you haven't had a play around, I also didn't realize that they had a free version. So I'm sure lots of listeners have already tried, but if you haven't and you're a little bit resistant like me, it's kind of worth having a little exploration. And then the other one that I wanted to mention is a not-for-profit that I met with a few weeks ago, and in fairness, completely blew my mind. But basically, it's called Follow World, and follow is FOLO. So it's www.world.follow. And what they're doing is they have some not-for-profit restaurants as well. But basically, when you shop online, you can donate a small percentage of your purchases to go towards a charity. And they're basically looking for analytics help. So if there's anyone that is going through learning that wants to take on a bit of a project, I'm sure they would be grateful for any support. Feel free to reach out to me directly in Slack or Twitter or whatever, and I can put you in touch with the charity, because they're a really cool group that are doing some really amazing things.
Very nice. And I'm probably going to get in trouble because you were the one that first brought up Domo, even though Search Discovery is a partner, but that is okay. You didn't hear it from me.
No, and I intentionally didn't tell you about it because I didn't want to be biasing the crew.
It's quite all right. It does have some interesting features and some really useful stuff. So I'm glad you got to take a look. Tim, what do you got?
Oh, I'm tempted to do two, but I'm going to go with just one. So the one that I'm excited about it on a couple of levels. One is this completely came through a listener who just had heard heard a series of episodes and reached out. So Daff Howells, who's over in the UK, said, you talk about R. Have you heard of NIME? And I was like, what? What's NIME? And he actually offered to, one evening, I think while his kids were getting put down to bed, we hopped on a hangout so he kind of demoed it to me. And he works for a company. He's a user of this platform NIME, but it's graphical data programming. So way back in my career when I worked at National Instruments, and they had this awesome LabVIEW, which was graphical programming. And I kind of got into that because I knew enough about programming, and then, I get to drag these boxes and do little connectors. And Nime is pretty much that for data. So I've downloaded it. I have to admit, I haven't played with it, but I did sit and watch what he was doing. But the reason he brought it up to me was he said it's like a gateway to something like R when you're trying to think through the sequence. I want to get the data from here. I want to do this transformation. It's all blocks of inputs and outputs, and you kind of wire it together. And it's open source. Like a lot of open source things, there are ways you can do paid versions. But it was really pretty slick. So it had me thinking, for anyone who says, I just don't want to dive into R or Python yet, but I would love to kind of get out of Excel and Google Sheets, it does seem like, Daph brought it up, and I think he nailed it. It is a great potential stepping stone and even a standalone thing on its own. So Nime, Knime.
See, I feel like they missed an opportunity, being from England and all, to maybe just call it Nime.
Well, it actually came out. It came out of. It's in Zurich, okay. So he's in the UK.
Fair enough.
It came out of the University of Constance, which I think is maybe actually in Germany, and I'm butchered the name of that. So it came out of academia, and it's kind of scaled into an organization. But I'd never heard of it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So
nice.
That was long-winded. What do you have, Michael?
Well, I actually am going to throw in a couple. So the first one was the one I was originally intending, which recently I had opportunity to do a little online research in a data science topic around collaborative filtering, and came across a really interesting and useful webpage by Professor William Cohen of Carnegie Mellon University. He has a really great tutorial on collaborative filtering, which the data scientists will already know is sort of basically a fancy word for recommendation engine. But a lot of good reading on his website and on his page, so recommend checking that out. The other thing is, in keeping with the topic of this show, one of the books I think is maybe one of the most important books you could ever read if you're going to be in services, either on your own or as a consultant, is a book called The Trusted Advisor by David Meister and a couple other people. I highly recommend it as a book. Also, Never Eat Alone is a really good book too, but The Trusted Advisor is one I recently read, and it just sort of blew my mind, like, oh my goodness, this is all correct. This is all the stuff some of it I've been doing, some of it I haven't been doing, and here's why I'm not doing as well as I want to do. So, good book, Trusted Advisor, and that's it. All right, so you've been listening. You're about ready to start your own business as a freelancer.
Is that what we said?
Or maybe you have questions, or you want to talk about something on the show. We would love to hear from you. We're active on the Measure Slack, on Twitter, on Facebook, and you can also reach us on our website at analyticshour.io. We'd love to hear from you. Adam, are you active on the Measure Slack?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Excellent.
There's Adam Ribaudo. Yeah.
So perfect. You can ask Adam questions. You seem like a friendly person. So
check in. Just make sure I'm okay, because I'm living in this cave now. There's not a lot of sunlight.
Yeah.
Running out of lamp oil. So.
And what is your bill rate for consulting on going out on for that? That may be a whole other branch of your practice
like
at this
that.
point.
My side hustle is going to be kind of meta. Teaching people how to side hustle.
Write an ebook. No, but so connect with Adam too to ask questions or explain more things. I'm sure he'd be willing to share his experience. And we'd love having you, Adam. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone for listening. If you like the Digital Analytics Power Hour, and you're also a fan of the iTunes, we would love it if you felt comfortable giving us a rating and review. I think that actually makes us more popular, which we really love to be popular. Tim Wilson especially. No, I'm just kidding. So that maybe might help others discover it, which maybe will make other freelancers and people going out on their own in the future.
Wait, that's my competition.
But you said there's room for more. You said there was room for more. Anyways, And frankly, I don't care, Adam. Like, maybe they'll send us checks. So,
I see.
you know. No, obviously. Yeah, exactly. It's the affiliate. Just use this affiliate code. No, but obviously we'd love it if you rated the show. Anyways, thanks again, Adam, for my co-hosts, Mo and Tim. If you're all analysts out there, you know what I'm going to say. Keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, or Measure Slack group. We welcome your comments and questions. Visit us on the web at analyticshour.io, facebook.com/analyticshour, or at analyticshour on Twitter.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Tim, Michael, Mo, and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them at Facebook at facebook.com/analyticshour and at their website analyticshour.io. Now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
None of that can go into the outtakes, Tim. I don't want to explicitly call that out.
Impeccable judgment when it comes to what goes in the outtakes.
Oh, right. You've gotten me in trouble multiple times.
And then I was laughingly his analysis exchange mentor.
And that was an important milestone for me emotionally, just to have a mentor.
I don't understand pop culture references.
No, so that's how you're like Tim.
I can't. There are actually no words for that. I can't.
Mo, I'm impressed that you haven't rage quit by now.
Also, it does appear, I thought I just had a runny nose, but I do have a bit of a blood nose. I'm not dying, I'm fine, but if I'm like shuffling around, don't be alarmed. I'm all good.
Don't mind me if I hemorrhage all over the microphone.
Right.
It's good. The show must go on.
Just passed out. That was great. You should have seen my face just went red. I was like, oh, he's serious.
Yeah. Let me put it to you this way. Yeah. Let's keep making Tim's editing job harder and harder.
Sure.
Really? What about only on their own? It's like...
Okay. I'm really struggling this morning.
Rock flag and sole proprietors.